Hello everybody, Quane here, and today we're doing the TCC XTREME challenge for Ultimecia's Lost Chapter on top of the regular ban list, which is Amy, Quistis, Trey, Charlotta, Kefka, and Arciela. You cannot use a friend support, you have to use Chocobo Summon, and you have to allow at least 3 uses of Aqua Power and its follow-up attack. So for this particular run, we're going to be using Alphinaud, 8, and Sazh, all of them being purple. So pretty much I picked this team because I know the gimmick of the Wave 2 bosses is when they do their Aqua Power, immediately after that they're going to follow up with, if they have Brave, a very nasty HP attack called Demon Splash that is pretty much guaranteed to kill you unless you have Last Stand. And if they are broken, if you can manage to break them before they do the attack, they will do a move on you that will stone your character for, I believe it's 2 turns. The other issue is that when they do Aqua Power, they get debuff immunity, and they also get a very nasty Brave damage reduction, so it's a lot more difficult to shave their Brave down. So the idea with this team is that we're making sure that 8 has the highest hit points. I actually removed some of Alphinaud's HP passes just to ensure that 8 has the highest hit points in the party, to ensure that they will always attack 8. Now Wave 1, I'm trying to use as few skills as possible, pretty much just enough to keep the buffs up, because when they get the buffs up that they currently have, they resist physical damage pretty bad. So the damage from 8 and the damage from Sazh kind of suffers a little bit. So essentially we're using Alphinaud and his magic and his splash damage to go ahead and take care of the majority of it. Sazh for this is fantastic because he extends 8's buff by a turn. So instead of 8's counter buff from the EX being 2 turns, it lasts for 3 turns, which pretty much ensures that he can always have the EX buff up. I don't recall if there was any point that I did let his EX buff go off, even for a short time. I'm recording this commentary after the fact, so, but pretty much majority of the fight, his buff was up. So he's pretty much countering everything, you don't have to worry about him. Sazh, I would just try and not get broke. If Sazh was being double focused, I would make sure that I didn't get broken, but taking a break here or there, especially if Alphinaud goes after to help bring the Brave back down, is perfectly fine. The other issue with this wave, which isn't really that much of an issue, just to be aware of, is that they also have a pretty nasty sap that they put on when they buff themselves. And it's I don't know, think about 5,000 or so. Essentially, you can get yourself in a bad situation if the timing's bad, where they come out of break, they have a few thousand Brave, they do the sap, next thing you know they've got about 10,000 Brave, and they hit you with an HP attack. So just something to be a little aware of. But so for this wave, pretty much all I'm doing is trying to conserve as many skills as I can, refreshing them when necessary, because this wave isn't really that bad, especially if you have them under control. I mean, 8's in absolutely no danger, he counters everything. Alphinaud, for those of you who don't have Alphinaud, when you do his EX, he gets Obsidian, which is the dark carbuncle, as opposed to the white one, which is the stance that you want him to be in. And both his Brave and his HP attack turn into a different variant. The Brave variant is an AoE Brave attack that follows up with an HP attack and gives him Brave refill. The HP version is a group attack. No, I'm sorry, it's not a group attack. It's a single target Brave, but it does splash damage. So essentially, if Alphinaud is not being targeted, then you would do the HP attack. And the very next move after that, he gets a free skill usage. So his ideal rotation is to pop his EX, HP attack, skill, and then either HP attack, skill again, or what I'll usually do is 2 HP attacks in a row, to where when he has 1 use of obsidian left, I'm doing an HP attack, so then when obsidian is gone, that's when he gets the free skill, which usually will be a skill 2. If I need to battery the party, it'll be a skill 1, and then his very next turn, the EX should be up again. So Alphinaud has a very great rotation. Pretty much if you have it set up to where Alphinaud is never targeted, he'll never run out of skills. The only time really that you ever actually have to use one of his skills and it not be free is if you don't get 2 free skill uses during the time his EX is up. If for whatever reason you have to brave attack more often, so you only get 1 skill usage instead of the 2 free skill usages that you have time to get during his obsidian buff, you may have to use an actual skill. Otherwise, Alphinaud never runs out of skills. He's like the man of unlimited skills. Sazh, and everybody knows how Sazh works. He just buffs your party. You got crazy damage. You can also use him as a battery in a pinch with skill 2. He does debuff a bit, nothing major, but his HP plus versions do give a little bit of debuffs to the enemies. Which every little bit helps. So there's actually quite a few good teams you can use for this particular stage. Evading is definitely the best option because the bosses in Wave 2 will always target whoever has the highest HP after they do the Aqua Raise move. So like in this case, I actually removed Alphinaud some of his HP passives. I forget if it was the actual HP passives or if I just removed the Leviathan passive. Whatever got me to where I had the lowest, well not the lowest, but lower hit points in 8, because Alphinaud had the highest, and then 8, and then Sazh. So that was the only thing I did with Alphinaud. 8, I believe I have his speed passes off just to get his EX to charge a little faster, make him a little slower, so he gets more counters out of his buff. But pretty much anybody with Evade would be good for this stage. So you've got Cater, 8, Shadow, you can use Edge. Galoof would work too. He won't counter everything since they do magic attacks. So you may not be getting as much damage from Galoof's counter, but he'll still jump in front of the individual, protect them, and he still has a very high percentage of not getting hit, even if it's not a physical attack. So Galoof is definitely a viable option. You've got Beatrix with her ability after her EX that her HP plus changes into that prevents HP damage, which would work. Did I already mention Edge? If not, you've got Edge's EX ability that grants evade for the entire party, which Sazh can extend that to 3 turns. Sazh and Hope are really good for that. Aiko and Yuna also extend buffs, but yeah. I don't need to mention any more about Aiko or Yuna. But so Sazh and Hope would both be really good for this, just for the ability to extend the buff, depending on the individual. I don't know if Beatrix's special buff can be extended or not. I'm not sure about that. I know 8's can definitely be extended, because that's what I did. I know Edges can be extended. And yeah, I just got a text message at that time. But you've also got the tank option, if you don't want to go Evade. A lot of people went with Evade because it is the easiest option. You can also do Shadow. His Evade isn't as high as like 8's or as Cater's, but it's still pretty darn high, and DPS wise he does a lot. So like with Shadow, what you could do is you could always just chance that his Evade is going to work the first like 2 times that they do Aqua Power or Aqua Raise, whatever it is. And if you get hit, just reset the wave. No big deal, you haven't lost that much time. And then after the second time, that's when you can go ahead and utilize his C65s, which he has 3 of them. And then you've also got the summon that you can use in a pinch. That essentially is 4 free times that you can go ahead and keep yourself safe. You got the 3 C65s that you can use. And then you've got the summon that you can pop out whenever necessary to go ahead and shave them down in time. Because what they'll do is if they have Brave, they'll do a very nasty HP attack called Demon Splash. That, unless you have Last Stand, is pretty much guaranteed to one-shot you. And then it also removes all of your buffs. So like if you have Zach's shield on, you're not going to have a shield after. So like if you're using Zach, for instance, then if his EX is ready and they're about to attack you, don't use the EX, because you're just going to lose a shield. Take the hit, do the Last Stand, refresh his EX after. The evade option is the best option, because in this case, every single time they miss 8, because his EX lasts for 2 turns, his EX buff, Sazh extends it to 3, and his rotation is pretty much good enough that you never actually run out of the EX buff. So I'm dodging every single one, countering. It's actually very easy with this team. There's really not much thought. The only thing you have to make sure of is you don't want to run the risk of somebody else getting broken, depending on the turn order. Obviously, you know, if you know that you get broken and the boss is going to have a few turns in a row, don't get broke. But if you know that 8 or Alphinaud or one of the other people get to go before the boss, even if you get broken, you can go ahead and take a break. It's not that big of a deal, especially since you do have Alphinaud as a healer. He's not the best healer, but he does heal with his skill too, and it is good enough after a couple uses to get you back in the clear. But really not too concerned about taking any HP damage period with this team, because pretty much as long as you keep them broken, you don't really have to worry about them HP attacking. Man, look at those counters from 8. So good with Sazh's buff. See, I originally was trying this team with Alphinaud instead of Alphinaud, which is too many buffs. Because between 8, his own frame buffs, and Alphinaud's frame buffs, he was stacked, he had 6. So he was getting absolutely no use out of Sazh's buffs. I mainly only had Sazh there just to extend his EX buff. And then I realized, you know, the whole reason I was bringing Alphinaud was for the debuff evasion, to prevent them doing the move that stones you for 2 turns. And then I looked more closely at the description and realized that they only do that when they do break, which that's the move that they do if they don't do Demon Splash. Like right there. If they're not broke, then they'll do Demon Splash, which is the nasty HP attack that removes all your buffs. And if you break them beforehand, they won't do the HP attack, but they'll do break, which will stone you. So in this case, it's fine because we evade. But like if you had a tank, for instance, like, you know, if you were running Zach, okay, the first one's gonna Demon Splash you. You'll survive your Last Stand. 1 hit left, or 1 hit point. And if the other one is broke, well, yeah, they're not going to HP attack Zach, but you no longer have Alphinaud's debuff immunity frame buff, and now Zach is stoned for 2 turns. And yeah, if you have HP regain, you know, he'll still get his HP regain, even if he's stoned and everything. But you obviously don't have him at that time to pull aggro if necessary, you know, to use his EX, to heal himself faster, just do brave damage in general. So the whole running a tank thing is still kind of tricky. You have to make sure that there's a gap between the turns, because if they get to go 2 times in a row, most of the time it's not going to end well. So ideally, if you're going to run a tank, what you want to try and do is have their turns split up a bit, so your tank can take the hit, do Last Stand, survive with 1 HP, and in between the tank and the other boss going, have a heal ready from somebody. So like if you're using, you know, especially if you're using like Y'shtola or Garnet or somebody who they have a fantastic heal but it's slow, don't just spam their EX all the time when it's ready. If you know that it's getting near time for them to do their HP attacks, save that EX. That way Zach or Snow or whoever your tank is can take the hit, survive with 1 HP, and then Garnet, Y'shtola, whoever it is, comes in after, heals them up, and then they can take the second hit. If there is a second hit. If they're broken, unfortunately, you know, you're gonna get stoned for 2 turns if you don't have debuff immunity. So, I mean, Alphinaud would be good for this. I probably could have still used Alphinaud in this run if I wanted to. I just realized that I didn't need her after realizing that they only stone you if they do the Brave attack as opposed to the HP attack after Aqua Rise. So, but if they can't hit you, they can't stone you. So that's why I went to Alphinaud for the extra damage. So, I mean, I could have used Alphinaud if I wanted to. It probably would have taken me a few more turns because there wouldn't be as much damage overall as Alphinaud does, but it could have been done. But so if you want to take a tank, it definitely would be a smart idea to have debuff immunity. So Lena would be fantastic. Lena and Alphinaud probably are the 2 best ones because they have debuff immunity and heals and other buffs in their kit. Alphinaud's just overall kit is fantastic because she can heal. She's got the Brave damage reduction, defense up, INT up, Brave regain. Alphinaud would be a fantastic choice. I originally in that run did Sazh, Aid, and Alphinaud, and Sazh wasn't even purple at the time. And I kind of was messing around, wasn't fully paying attention. Definitely could have done some stuff better. There were times when I wasn't paying attention to if I'd already extended 8's buff or not, so I know I wasted a few of Sazh's skill 2. And I still did in like 119 turns with the 0 out of 3 Sazh. And then I went ahead and purpled him specifically for this and wound up doing it, I think it was a little over 90 turns is what I wound up finishing it in with this team. So Alphinaud or Lena, debuff immunity would be good if you're going to run a tank. You know, Snow would be a good tank. I mean, anybody who has Last Stand works. I know people have used Freya because she's got the party-wide Last Stand. I've seen a run with Freya and Garnet, and I forget who the third was. But that particular team didn't have any dedicated tank. They just relied on the group Last Stand from Freya with Freya's heals, and then having Garnet's EX ready in between. So quite a few good options you can do with this. Definitely would be tricky if you don't have evade or any sort of actual tank. I believe the bosses do have some sort of a gimmick where you can prevent them from doing the Aqua Raise move. I believe if you paralyze them at the right time, like I was told it's like 80% and 50%, that if you paralyze them at the right time, that they won't actually use Aqua Rise. So I mean, if you can get that timing done and figure out exactly when they do it, then I mean, in theory, you could do this without any sort of tank whatsoever. But I mean, most people have either a tank or an evade unit. I mean, most people have either 8 or Shadow or Edge or Cater. You know, a lot of people have at least one of them. You know, unless you're an absolutely brand new player. And a lot of people have multiple tanks, if not at least one. I mean, pretty much everybody probably got Zach back when he first got his EX Plus. I know a lot of people went for Snow. Zach's probably the most popular and most used one. But I mean, I've got Zach, I've got Snow, and I've got Galoof. I've got all three of them. So yeah, in this run, I believe I could have gone even harder, because if I recall correctly, I think Sazh had 1 or 2 skills left at the end, and I believe 8 actually had like 3 skills left at the end. So I could have actually gone even harder doing this run. And this run, I don't actually even use the summon. Kind of got to the point where I knew I wouldn't need it. So I was just like, hey, why not? Let's go ahead and do it without even using the summon, because this team is just fantastic. I mean, Alphinaud does so much damage. You've got, 8, who does very good damage, and his counters, that's all free damage, not counting for a turn. Sazh does fantastic damage, and Sazh has a good amount of skill uses. His EX is pretty fast. So, I mean, I think I did a few HP attacks here and there with Sazh, just to kind of conserve his skills a little bit. Because, he does decent damage from his HP plus. It's not terrible, it's not the best, but there's certainly characters who their HP plus is a lot worse. And he does give that little debuff. I believe it's, like a speed down debuff, an attack, or speed buff, and max brave. I forget what exactly he gives, but his brave plus and HP plus do give a little bit of debuff, which are only going to be on the boss for a limited time, because when they do Aqua Rise, they cleanse everything except for frame debuffs. So if you have a frame debuff on them beforehand, it'll stick. Otherwise, they're going to cleanse anyways. The most difficult part with these guys is just getting the spacing. It seems like no matter what, you can never get a good spacing to where there's more than maybe 2 people who go in between them. But I mean, overall, it's not too terrible. I mean, now if you're just doing the regular chaos, I mean, if you go on there with ulti or Amy, I mean, they can't buff themselves if they can't get a turn, right? So if you're trying to do this without doing the TCC XTREME challenge, it's really not that difficult, especially if you have the right units. I mean, if you go in there with Amy and ulti and really any third unit, you're pretty much going to destroy this. I mean, they're not even going to get a turn at all. But as far as the extreme, it wasn't too terrible. It definitely wasn't as challenging as the last one, which all the people who did it know it was a nightmare. And anybody who tried it, who maybe couldn't have done it, knows that it was a nightmare. So this one wasn't anywhere near as difficult. I knew a lot of people were going to go with evade units because it's the easiest and the smartest choice, quite frankly. But I still did another run that will be put up as well, of using, not going with evade. That particular run I used Kais, Zach, and Alphinaud. So if you want to see a run that doesn't use evade, just kind of get an idea, you can go ahead and check that video out as well. I also did a run that I didn't record because I was just testing it with Zach, Alphinaud, and Raijin. That would have worked. I wasn't paying attention at the end, and Zach wound up getting killed literally right at the end. So I was still able to finish the fight in like 99 turns, I believe. So if I had been paying attention and Zach wouldn't have died, that team would have worked fine. Pretty much the strategy with that particular team was timing Raijin's Paralyze to pop it off at the right times, to where if they both were gonna, rise up and buff themselves, you can't debuff them once they do that. So go ahead and let one rise up, pop Raijin's Paralyze. The one who already rose up, you can't debuff him, so he won't be paralyzed, but the other one will. That should buy you enough time in between your turns that the one who buffed himself will attack your tank, the last stand, 1 hit point left, and then you should be able to heal them up in the meantime before the other one gets a chance to then buff himself. It's the only problem with Raijin is that he's slow. I mean, really slow. Like, his EX is normal speed, but because of how slow he is as a character, it seems like it's a fast EX. Like, it seems like you do a skill and then like a regular HP attack or brave attack, and it's like his EX is ready again. I mean, it's not like he's drastically slow, like you're never going to get a turn, but you can definitely tell. I mean, there'll be times where, you know, depending on how fast your other units are, they might get to go 2 times before Raijin gets to go. But I mean, damage-wise, Raijin's actually very good, especially with his Imperil and the Enchant. I mean, his skill 1, I usually easily do at least 60,000 damage, like even if he's going from 0 brave pretty much, so it's very potent. His skill 2 does a lot of damage, 50% splash. His EX is 100% AoE. He's got two C65 uses, so that really allows you to pop his Paralyze if necessary, because for those of you who don't know how he works, he has a buff from his EX that has stacks on it, and once he gets 3 stacks, his HP plus turns into, I believe the name's, was it Thunder Discharge? It's a different HP plus attack that's a guaranteed AoE paralysis. And every move he does, whether it's Brave Attack, HP, skill, the only thing that doesn't increase the stack is when you actually use the special HP attack that does the paralysis. So if you have a point where you know that you need to paralyze him at that time and you only have 1 stack, you can pop his 2 C65s if you have no other option and paralyze him. Or if you're at 2 stacks and you need to do it, you only use the C65 1 time. Which is what I prefer to do. That way you have essentially 2 quick paralyzes that you can do. Not to mention he also has 20% HP regain, which is pretty good. I mean, you know, as long as the bosses aren't spamming HP attacks all the time, that's definitely enough to rely on Raijin as a soul healer. The only issue with that is if Raijin gets hit because of how slow he is, obviously it's going to take a lot longer for him to do 4 or 5 turns to refill his health as opposed to a different character. So that's really the only potential issue with Raijin's HP regain, is if he's the one who gets hit and you need to heal up, it may take a bit of time. So this fight's just about over. I think I finished it in like right around 90 turns. I don't recall exactly. I think it's like 92 or something like that. Oh yeah, we got 3 skills left on 8. Definitely should have gone a little bit harder. And yeah, you can see still got tons of skills left on Alphinaud. I mean, I didn't need to use a skill. I figured might as well use HP plus there, get the splash damage, because it does more damage overall than the second skill. But I mean, you can see he still had tons of skills left. But yeah, these challenges are definitely a lot of fun. So if you don't do them, definitely try them. I mean, if you're a newer player, you may not have the units to do some of them. Some of them have a lot of unique restrictions that there's a small list of characters that can actually complete it. Perfect example was the last one that we did for the Veiled Magician. There is a very small list of characters who are actually viable for that particular TCC XTREME, but it's definitely a lot of fun. Check out the Crystal Chronicles. They've got Facebook, they've got a Twitter account, a lot of cool stuff on there. They have a podcast that they do where they talk about all the events, they talk about these challenges, so definitely check them out and do your own TCC challenge, and thanks for watching.